Hola, buen dia. It's me, Peppermint. And when I'm not on RuPaul's Drag Race or simply being New York City's sweetest diva, I'm tuned into the fabulously empowering Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice Power Hour, coming to you every weeknight at 7 p.m. live from our good old friends at the BRCSJ Virtual HQ via their Facebook page. Tune in tonight.
Need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.
Social justice, power hour, power hour, power hour. Social justice.
Good evening to our friends on the East Coast. Good afternoon to our friends in the West, and good in-between time to our friends in those in-between spaces. Welcome, 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 my friends. Welcome to the Social Justice Power Hour. Welcome to the virtual headquarters of the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice. My name is Robert Martin the Schreiber. I am the chief activist here at the center and your host for this evening, as I have been for the past year, 10, 11, 12 months, 2 years. Who knows any more time is a loop at this point. Over 450 some odd shows, many of them very odd indeed. We've come at you, my friends, every single freaking weeknight since the pandemic started. The Power Hour has been here, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And it's been an amazing experience, an extraordinary experience. And we're so thrilled that you join us in virtual community. And because there have been so many meaningful moments here in the Power Hour, we decided we're going to end the year with a bang, as it were, and share highlights of some of these extraordinary conversations, some of these extraordinary folks who have dropped by the Power Hour. So please enjoy all this week. You're going to see some really just special things, my friends. And if you're catching it for the first time, enjoy. And if you're seeing it for the second, you're going to catch all the subtle nuances. But this is good stuff. This is good stuff. This is community. And this is what we do in the face of adversity. So thank you for being with us. We are here for you, and we appreciate you being here with us. Speaking of, number one, no doubt, no diggity, my friends. We will be back in 2022 with the Power Hour, bigger and brighter than ever. And please do be with us. And also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, most of you are aware of this, we lost our physical headquarters during the pandemic. And we want to gather together in community for reals in 2022. It's hard to be a safe space without a space, y'all. So please do support the center. Give whatever is within your means and within your heart at the end of this year, so the next year can be that more extraordinary. As you enjoy this show tonight, as you enjoy these conversations tonight, as you are entertained, as you are empowered, as you are inspired, please share some of that with us, with our community. And please do consider making a donation. But it's not required. The ticket is free. The Power Hour has always been here for all. So enjoy, my friends. Enjoy these meaningful moments. Enjoy these extraordinary folks. Enjoy this time in virtual community. I'll be back on the flip side to say goodnight to all y'all. But until then, much love and respect. And let's get on with the show. Because you're talking about, again, something that many people would see, a pie that there are only so many pieces of. And it seems like this community not only is baking the freaking pies and putting them out there for everybody, so everybody gets a piece.
Yes.
But you're shouting each other out all the time.
Yes. Yes. And that's, for some of us, it's like, it's how we were raised, it was very personal. It was our grandmamas who taught us, to be in community, and not see each other as competition. But it even, from a more formal standpoint, the Black Women's Club movement of like the 1940s, their motto was lifting as we climb. And I just, when I read that in college, I could visualize it. The idea of you're climbing, but you're, lifting other people up at the same time. And I never forgot that. And so, you attract, people who have a similar sensibility. And so, I connected with writers like Kiese Layman, who has been lifting me as he climbs. And so now I'm lifting other people, and it's, it feels great. It really feels great. So the success is great, but then to be successful in the context of a community of people who are celebrating with you and you get to celebrate them, that's the best feeling.
When the news starts targeting, when our opposition starts targeting trans youth, these kids lose control of who and how their stories are being told, who's telling the stories and how those stories are being told. So, it becomes this narrative told by people who aren't at the center of the story about what it means to be trans and what their transness means and what the implications are. And this film lets these kids be the superheroes in their own stories and be the storytellers of their own narratives the way that we all deserve. And we are all entitled to have, or we are all entitled to be the tellers of our own stories in a way that they're just kids. There's a moment in the film where Sarah Rose Hockman, who's a cross-country skier and cross-country runner, is just swinging her feet. Where's my hand? It's just swinging her feet on the chairlift. And it's such a childlike thing to do. It's such a kid thing to do. They were, early teenagers when the film started production. And as we listen to the anti-trans rhetoric and legislation all across the country, it takes the focus away from the fact that we're talking about kids. We're talking about kids. And
yeah. Wow. Those are two great questions. Let's talk first about the second one and kind of get your take on this too as well. So this idea that, really, maybe what's going on here is that people are, that it's self-interest and people are interested only in how well they're doing and, and really not caring about others, as long as I can get ahead. And I think that's definitely a real issue that's out there. But here's how I would kind of turn that on its head. And that is in one of the chapters in the book, we talk about the cost of poverty in America and what that's costing, not just folks who are in poverty, but for the society as a whole. And so I did this analysis where I estimated what is the annual cost of childhood poverty for the country as a whole. Now, we know that childhood poverty increases healthcare costs for children. We know that it reduces children's economic productivity when they become adults. And we know it increases criminal justice costs. So we factored all those things in. And we're actually pretty conservative in estimating this. And we came up with a dollar value that childhood poverty in 2015 cost the United States slightly over $1 trillion. To put that in perspective, that was about 28% of the entire federal budget. So the question is not, are we paying or are we not paying? The question is, how are we paying for poverty? And what we're doing is we're paying for it on the back end of the problem rather than the front end of the problem. And it's always a lot more expensive to pay for something on the back end of the problem. So even, I would make the argument in terms of people's self-interest that it's in your self-interest to reduce poverty in this country because it will actually save us all a huge amount in the future. The other thing that came out of this study was we showed that for every dollar we spend on reducing childhood poverty, we save between $7 and $12 down the road. So that's a really big bang for the buck. And that's sort of turning the argument on its head and saying, if you're only interested in yourself and your sort of self-interest, you actually ought to be thinking about it this way because we'll all benefit from it.
And I mean, at the time there was a lot of strategic thinking going into why Rosa Parks was the face of the Montgomery bus boycott and why Bayard Rustin was never the face of the civil rights movement. And it had to do with the fact that she was considered a sort of more palatable, respectable figure. She, middle class, light skin, not gay, all those things. At what cost do we leave certain people out? And I think the cost is, it's almost like we kind of protect a certain kind of American innocence by like making Rosa Parks into this, woman who had, this tired, nice woman who just has an idea all of a sudden that she doesn't want to get up for somebody, and sort of obscure, people like Bayard Rustin, who have been kicked out of so many different places by them, and not politely, beaten up, been on a chain gang. So I think one thing that I think is that it takes all different kinds of activism and all different kinds of presentations of a lot of issues to move the needle forward. And that even Bayard Rustin would probably agree that there's a lot to be said for strategic activism and finding the person you can sell the story with. But I mean, as a historian, I want people to know the whole story. And I think that even activists also probably need to understand like strategy and compromise and what it is you're trying to do. So it's really important not to oversimplify things.
Talking about the concept of being cisgender, all it describes is that you're not trans. People often like to say that, and many trans people, we all have our different perspectives, but at least in my perspective, people often say or try to say it's kind of the I don't see color thing. They'll say, well, there's nothing different between you and a well, usually they say between you and a man, unwittingly at times implying that I am not myself a man, but rather something different. But they'll often say, oh, well, there's nothing different between you and a cis man. And I actually object to that. I think the difference is more than just, I do have a different assignment at birth. And that is the primary difference, of course. But the experience of being trans is different than the experience of being cis. In most cases, I didn't grow up with a cis male upbringing. That doesn't make me any less of a man. And it certainly doesn't mean that my perceived female upbringing made me a girl, because it did not and does not. But my experience of having been socialized female with the internal identity of a boy is completely unique to the trans experience, at least in terms of what I experience. And so I also think that it's necessary to make this definition because, there are differences, and those differences are awesome. At least from my perspective as a trans person, a lot of the things I've gotten to do and experience that could only have been because I was trans, and not even talking about any of this lawsuit stuff. I think we're wonderful. Also, there's a lot of pain that I've experienced because I'm trans that cis people might not experience, and therefore not be able to relate to. So I think that the distinction is important because trans men are men, trans women are women, and trans people are people. But a lot of us have fellowship in the fact that our experiences were different than the cis experience.
Can't do the things you need to do, or you're not equipped to do the things that need to be done. And those are the days that you chop the vegetables.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And you still move forward, but you don't do the things you're not able to do that day.
Yes. Because all you're doing, if you push yourself, this goes back to this idea of like how much you push yourself. So it's like, if you push yourself, all you're doing is robbing you in a week, when you in a week is not going to be able to do it now 3 days in a row, instead of having taken that day to rest. I had a friend who that year, actually, when I was 29, when I was just sort of like, it's all the center can't hold, where she was like, she was just like, lie fallow. She's like, essentially take your cue from nature. Like, is everything always in bloom? Is it always winter anywhere? Like, you know what I mean? Like this idea of like, I came across this phrase, this quote recently that I love, this phrase of like, never cut a tree down in the winter. because it like might look like it's dead, but you don't actually know what's happening. You have to give it time and see what it does in the spring. And like, I think that's very similar to your friend being like, just chop the vegetables. It's sort of like, if you got to take a minute and like, just like regroup. I always am talking in therapy about this idea of situational best with people, because I think it's really important of like, what's your situational best? At the end of the day, if you're like, oh, this day sucked, this day, whatever, it's like, did you do your situational best? Like, let that be the thing you aim for. The standard you should be holding yourself to when you are fed and watered and slept for 8 hours and not having any fights with anyone in your life, and there isn't anything triggering happening in your existence, and maybe there's no pandemic and whatever. The standard you hold yourself in that state should not be the same standard you hold yourself to when you're like, just, you know, relapsed on a drug of your choice, and also you haven't slept in 3 days, and also you're miserable, and also you're fighting with your mom, and also, you know, it's like those are not going to be the same versions of yourself. How can you expect them to function at the same level? How can you expect the same out of them? It actually seems like really a cruel thing to.
You know, I speak as myself from different ages. From when I was less enlightened about things. I speak, from the viewpoint of, a couple different people. I try not to create villains and heroes. Villains and heroes. I've said this before, but villains and heroes are good for like Marvel movies, like Captain America, and those things make for exciting narratives. But in real life, how many real villains and heroes, do we have in our daily lives? I tried to write people from an understanding that nobody is the way they are just because they are evil. Something happened, something was subtracted from them as they moved through the world. And so the characters in the book, and, first of all, they aren't characters. They're people that I know. I try to speak as them, with an understanding that I didn't start out wanting to be, a feckless drug addict, which is what I kind of ended up being. There were things that happened in my life that, made me that. And if I'm going to afford myself that kind of grace, I may as well try to afford that kind of grace, to the people who were orbiting me at the time. So, when I speak as my mother, like I interviewed her, and, I just asked her basic questions. Like, there was like, I think I had a list of like 15 questions that I asked her, and she just answered them matter-of-factly. And then I took those answers and I made them into, a narrative. I tried to understand how she was feeling during these different points in her life. And fortunately that worked out, because, when she read the book, she was very pleased, because that could have gone south real bad. But, just as far as the different voices in the book, like I just got tired of hearing this one, the one that you're hearing right now, this boring guy who just babbles on and on. I wanted some different voices from different time periods to speak.
And so King he's woken up in the middle of the night. He's shackled, put in the back of a car, driven away from the jail. He thinks it was going to be the end of his life. He thought he'd never see his family again. This is a 31-year-old Dr. King. We wouldn't, had he not survived that night, there'd be no Birmingham campaign. There'd be no March on Washington. There'd be no Selma. There'd be no civil rights legislation. We don't know. We don't know what our reality would be. And so King is driven across Georgia, never told where he's going. It was a dark night of the soul, is the way Andrew Young told me what King experienced. But this would be transformational for him, because by facing down death, because he had refused bail, because he was going through this, and then the days he spent in this dangerous Reidsville State Prison, where we found all kinds of documents of the just the sadistic conditions that Black prisoners were under, the murders that happened, the experience on the chain gang that King was heading into. But King King chose that, and so he made that decision. He was not a helpless bystander. He realized he had to do this, and when he gets through that night, and when he gets through this experience, then he can go on to Birmingham. Then we can have a letter from Birmingham jail. We can have the Birmingham campaign that would really move public will for support of civil rights, which again would do the thing that the Atlanta sit-in students were trying to do. You know, how as activists do we focus people in on our issue? How do we make them confront it, and how do we gain sympathy to this cause? How do we help? How do we create a moral theater that helps people see what is right and what is wrong, and the things that they've taken for granted and that they've lived with their whole lives are wrong, and there should be change. And how do we get the public will so the politicians have to act on it? And so that's why it's a transformational moment for King that we take you through this journey in the story that I just think is really important to understand how the Dr. King we remember, how that happened, but helps us see the civil rights movement differently than sometimes it's portrayed in America, where it's all about Dr. King. But realize there were these young people who King listened to, who he supported. He didn't try to co-opt their movement. He was a mentor and a friend, and they loved him, and he loved them, and realizing, you know, that the way that Lonnie just started a movement, and, you know, women at Spelman and, you know, men at Morehouse and all this Black Atlanta college students just, you know, showed up, and you know, a couple days before that sit-in, you know, Lonnie's and one of the women leaders, Herschel Sullivan, they're just recruiting at the library. You know, young people signed up to then go, and then they changed history. But understanding that, you know, there's this collective struggle in the civil rights movement, a lot of names we don't always know, and so centering them, their place in the story is really important to us.
And to anyone watching, this is not a slam. This is more like, as your friend, let me tell you what I don't think works when you're talking to someone of color, whether Black, Asian, Latin, whatever. I don't see color. I only see people. That sounds so good. It sounds so good. I don't see color. I only see people. But what you just said to me is, I don't see your culture. I'm not going to acknowledge that. We're all the same, so you can be like me. That is just as bad as coming out, in my opinion, and othering someone because of their color. You've othered me anyway by stripping something away from me. No one ever said that we all have to look alike and that we all have to agree. Just acknowledge and respect this, or where I come from, or what makes up my background, just so I can do the same to you. It's okay that you see Black. It's okay that you see white. It's okay that you make a joke if you're a stand-up in taste. It's okay that you do certain things, but it's the respect factor. It's, I'm not worse than you, or worse off, or less than because I look like this, or you're no better. You can still see the color, but just know that we're all here. That, I think, is the piece. That's the important piece of that thing. We're all the same despite being different colors. Not, I like you despite you being Black. I like you, period. You're Black, period. You're cool, period.
But that being said, I'm especially proud of the work I did in Martian Manhunter. You know, probably my favorite thing I ever did at DC. Not probably, it is my favorite thing I ever did at DC. And, you know, his own, because it reckons with the struggle you have if you're not on the binary, you know, for whether that comes to gender or, in my case, sexuality. You know, if I wanted, I could easily pass, quote unquote, if I wanted to, but then I wouldn't be being true to myself. So it's kind of a unique struggle, and it's allegorical in Martian Manhunter, who is an alien that can look like a human if he wants, but it's not allegorical, it's literal in his partner Diane Mead, who I made bisexual. And to be honest, you want to talk about firsts. I think it's the first time I've seen a Big Two comic address bisexual erasure, the bisexual struggle, and the pressures we deal with both from the straight community, but also from the gay community and the binary. You know, the pressure to choose, the pressure to change how you identify because you've met a single person. Almost, but not every person I've dated has pressured me to either say that I'm straight now if I'm with a woman, or I must be gay now if I'm with a man. And it's like, no, nothing's changed. I'm with a person, you know, and that's.
When people ask me what the book is about, I say, think of, you know, a sweeping, majestic, panoramic study of Black women musicians across the centuries. This book is not that. This book is the story of why that book hasn't been written. And in that sense, it's about, you know, turning those tastemakers and those gatekeepers of culture and knowledge production, right, about the worth or the lack of value of Black cultural life, turning them into objects of inquiry, asking questions of them about the choices that they made with regards to how they narrated Black cultural life. And then it's also about all the sisters who just kept busy making their own meaning and their own knowledge about their own art and about the art that they loved. And, you know, if anything, the example that I just gave is a reminder of how resistant, you know, dominant cultural publics can be to really ceding the floor and thinking expansively about, you know, the other folks in the world and how they define themselves and how they define intimately what they value, how they engage in forms of self-fashioning and world making, as our young folks like to say, right? They can't handle world making, you know, if it's coming from us, because that means, you know, having to change their definitions of their own world.
But I think it's important for our community to understand the difficulties that we all face sometimes and how we overcome them. So can you share with us, if you don't mind, there was an incident you were shopping one day and someone was not as accepting of you as they should be. In fact, they were downright pretty awful. But the way you responded to it is what I want our community to understand and to be able to move forward, because I know we all deal with this at times, and it's important to see how someone as strong as yourself, as someone as present as yourself, as someone as so public as yourself still has to deal with this kind of hatred and bigotry and prejudice. So it's important that we see that in our public figures, but it's also really important, I think, to our community to understand how we can combat it. And I'll let you continue from there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how strong. I mean, I think I cried at every interview that I did about it. But you know, I was shopping. I just ran out to the grocery store, which is just 2 miles from my house, to get some golden kiwis because they were on sale, and I love golden kiwis. And the second I walked in, she identified me, and she just began saying horrible things, racial slurs. You know, implying that I destroyed my husband's bloodline because he married me, and you know, I didn't belong in this country. Just some awful things. And you know, I stood there and I cried. I mean, that was really my response. I'm not quick on my feet. I'm non-confrontational, so usually that's how I respond. But it continued. The aggression continued. That eventually, when I went out to my car, she followed me out to my car. And I was able to film like the last couple seconds of the assault. And, you know, I was frozen for a while. I got home, I cried for a long time. And it wasn't so much like, I mean, people experience this every day, right? A lot of folks go through this every day. But it was this idea that this woman who did not know me personally, had never had a conversation with me, hated me so much just because I was born somewhere else and wasn't from here. And I don't like to accept that, right? I like to live in this sort of naive bubble that people want to listen to each other and get to know each other. You can't hate someone you don't know. So for me, I think the hardest part was accepting that reality, because I really try to push against that reality. And, my response was I try to think about her story. She wasn't born feeling these things or believing these things. And of course, someone taught her that. And I feel heartbroken that she was taught that. But I wanted to know, did she teach anyone else this? Did she have children and grandchildren? And how can we get her to be the one that ends this cycle? So I asked, in lieu of arresting her and charges, I wanted her to receive the appropriate support to hopefully find a change. I wanted her to see herself and not like who she saw. And I wanted others to see her and say, that could have been me. This is the day that I'm going to change. And I'm going to learn about different people and listen to them and figure out a better way out. So I just asked that she be met with compassion, because I don't know her story. And I was raised with so much love. I had a mother who loved me. I had a grandmother who loved me. And I'm pretty sure she has a different story. So I was lucky she wasn't, and I just hope that she can find a way to make things right with herself and going forward.
To see Superman the movie with Christopher Reeve and just being excited to see a superhero movie, which, back in those days were literally non-existent. I believe Superman was the only superhero movie of the 70s that was, based on a comic book. Just being so excited to see that. And then you get to the scene where they introduce the first black character that you see. And that black character is a pimp, and he's played for laughs. And, and I think it was also the fact that I recognized that Metropolis in the movie was actually just New York City. And so all these things. And I just remember being pulled out of that moment. Right. And just this supreme disappointment of, oh, this isn't for me. Right. Like suddenly it felt like Superman wasn't for me. And at 10 years old, like I just got pissed off. Like I was the angriest 10-year-old, and I come back to that feeling nearly every day. And I think, I don't ever want anyone feeling that again. Right. And so much of the work that I do really is, in a lot of ways, is for that 10-year-old kid. And you can, it's not just that 10-year-old black kid or that 10-year-old biracial kid or that 10-year-old fat kid or that 10-year-old queer kid or that 10-year-old, non-binary, gender fluid, differently abled kid. It's for every single kid. Every single kid deserves to see not only themselves in some capacity, but every kid really needs to understand that they are, how do I put this? That there are others that aren't like them. And that's what makes the world special. It's like
in 2019, my freshman year of high school, I came out and went to a football game with my girlfriend. And what I was expecting to be a really exciting experience turned into a negative one because everyone was super unaccepting. And by the next week, I could not walk from class to class without being harassed by my peers. Because it got worse, I went to my principal and she told me that if I don't want to get bullied, then I should just not hold hands with my girlfriend. I left her office feeling defeated, and I had to walk around every day feeling ashamed of who I was.
Feeling like I couldn't protect her was the worst. It was so frightening. But the Bayard Rustin Center took that fear and replaced it with hope. From the very first conversation we had with Rob and Carol, we knew things were going to be okay. They told us that they'd help us make her school a safe and inclusive space for every student. And we could not have asked for better guidance or support, whether it was phone calls or emails, Zoom meetings. They stood by us, helping us petition the administration for a safe and inclusive space. Unfortunately, when the school district decided they were not interested in protecting LGBTQ plus students, Rob was relentless in his search for and even finding us an attorney to take our case. I could never thank you enough for protecting my child, for protecting all children, and for working to ensure that every student in our district is treated with the respect and dignity they deserve.
My school will be a safe and inclusive place for all students, and that wouldn't be possible without the Bayard-Rustin Center for Social Justice.
It both excites me, but also makes me wonder about like all the work that never did get bought and picked up or like supported. You know, it's really interesting to think about, and it's a really interesting and sometimes fraught time to be a Black author, if I'm being honest.
That, you know what, that's a question and a thought that's never been raised on, you know, this past year of Power Hours, and that's an interesting idea to explore. I wonder if there's a way to go back and look at what was missed before this, as you said yourself, this quote unquote moment of reckoning, this time when finally publishing houses are, and not wholly by any, you know, let's not fool ourselves. You know, let's be optimistic, but there's still a lot of work and a lot of movement forward that we need to do. But Absolutely. There is certainly more recognition now. But Absolutely. Is there a way to go back and say, okay, in these past couple of years or these past couple of freaking decades,
right?
What voices haven't we heard? What books have we missed?
Right. What stories have yet to be told? Like that's really exciting, you know, and I think that's one of the most exciting things about Robert's book, especially The Prophets, is the story, you know, him wanting to explore, you know, love between men in this era is something that I have never seen or read in my life, you know, and to have the surfacing of different stories that we're unfamiliar with that feel revolutionary is
as we get into this, because as though any journalism that ever existed was objective and didn't, as though any straight white man who sat down to do that work did not show up fully in their full straight white male self and bring all of their full straight white male biases and assumptions and resources and networks to the everything that they ever published is absurd, you know? And so it is a classic example of where a debate is set up to put people with less privilege on the defensive from the beginning. Prove to me why you, as a Black gay person, should be able to say everything that is relevant about your experience as a Black gay person to this, or prove to me why that's relevant, and not you prove to me why you, as a straight white man, shouldn't have to like worry about being a straight white man all the time. That thing you just said was kind of a straight white man thing, sir. You know, and so now I will say we have entered into an era, in part largely, frankly, thanks to social media, where in fact those tables have gotten turned off. And that's part of how we've gotten here, is that people have been able to say, that headline sounds like it's coming from the perspective of a straight white person. Really? That framing of that article seems like it's coming from the perspective of somebody who's never known someone who was homeless. Really, the framing of that article sounds like it's coming from the perspective of somebody who's never had a disease. You know, so we've been able to turn the tables because of social media. So I very rarely, one of the signs of it is I very rarely have to have this conversation anymore. There was a time in my career, if I was on a panel, if I was talking in public in any way, almost always we would have to sort of hash this out. And there would be somebody else on the panel who would be like the voice of reason. Well, you know, Kai's really out there, but this is how I split. It almost never comes up anymore because we've been able to turn the tables a little bit. Still does, particularly at those legacy media stations. But luckily, it is not something, certainly as a host at WNYC, that I ever have to. I have to worry about telling the truth, not saying things that I don't know to be true, you know, and trying to be as fair and thorough as I can be.
You know, I thought that was the perfect script for the social justice hour. I always think of that quote from Mr. Rogers that his mother told him, that in times of disasters, always look for the helpers. And I feel like you and your show are the helpers, and Stinky's the helper in the mud strip.
That's very sweet of you to say. I'm a little vulnerable tonight, so you're going to make me cry. But it's beautiful because it encapsulates that idea that here's this monumental task, right? And Stinky's like, hey, I got up early. I did it. No worries.
Exactly.
So,
and those are the type of people that do it. I'm lucky with mutts. I get to meet. I've got to meet a lot of people who help animals, and that's their attitude. I'm so impressed with people that just get up every day and try to save as many animals as they can and don't think twice about it. Just do it.
I remember once I got in my car, I cried. I cried a heavy, heavy cry because I thought about all the ancestors, all the Black women who came before me, who had to go through similar things. I thought about my grandmother, my great-grandmother, who were in service industries, who had to experience racism in the workplace. I thought about my mother, and I thought about me. And now all of these different generations that are, experiencing racial trauma, racial aggression. And I thought, I've done everything that they've said to do. I went to school, I've played the game, I've done all of these things. And still, it's not enough that the humanity toward people of color, LGBTQ, anyone who feels othered in a certain situation, mothers over 40 years old, however you might feel othered on occasions, it hurt and I cried and I felt that pain because I wasn't in a position to leave, and at that time. And so I remember turning on the radio and in my crying stupor, Whitney Houston's Where Do Broken Hearts Go comes on the radio. And I laugh and cry. And I'm like, oh God, you have such a sense of humor. Where do the broken hearts go of women of color when we can't take it anymore in the workplace? And it was in that car ride, in that car, sitting crying, lashes, I think, had fallen to the floor at that time. I said to myself, Robert, I don't know what it's going to look like. This was 2013 at this time. I didn't know what it would look like, but I said, I'm going to use my voice. I'm going to use my voice in a way that makes the workplace work for women of color in the workplace. And like you said, ultimately, if it's working for women of color, it's working for everybody, right? Because of those intersections. And I said, I don't want another woman to have to enter into an environment and feel like she's not enough. Audre Lorde said, beware of feeling you're not good enough to deserve it. And we all deserve a space in which we can feel seen. We can bring those authentic pieces of ourselves.
Your art, if you want it to be a career, is a commodity of sorts. So you always have to walk that fine line, find that balance between what you're selling to folks and what you believe in and what you think they might swallow in between.
That is true. The counterpoint to that, which is very reassuring in comics land, is that, like in the world of publishing, comics is a pretty small pond. And, the March trilogy is an extremely successful book in terms of sales and in terms of its influence and hopeful continued influence on society. Outside of March, what's amazing about doing comics is that it's such a small pond that you can take some kind of big risks, creative risks, or in terms of taking a chance on making a statement that's meaningful but chancy, or cranking out fiction that can tread a line. Making comics and particularly making graphic novels it's a nice playground. It's a good middle ground where you're able, these are works which will last. You're able to express yourself with a lot of freedom, but the stakes are fairly low. And even in terms of making comics, I make all my stuff physically on paper with ink and ink washes. It certainly takes time, but if you need to redo something, you just redo it. like the stakes are so low. It's so accessible. In that way, I think it's the most democratic mass medium in terms of anyone being able to express something that's important to them.
I find, and again, I think it's the way I use the term queer, which is, it may or may not be correct, but, and I know it's controversial among some, but it's about a way of seeing the world. It's about a way of skewing the world, sometimes just enough, just to sort of throw it off kilter. And it's one of the things I love about being gay. It's one of the things I love about being part of the queer community is that shift, right? Like, and those are the members of our community I'm just so fucking excited about when they push and pull against tradition, against patriarchy, against the normal, and get something really extraordinary about it. I have often said, and I'm sure a million people have said this, that one of the great tragedies of AIDS, of course, is that we lost thousands of designers with very specific sensibilities. And without them, the vacuum was filled with others who didn't have those sensibilities. I think all the time about how when Neil died at DC Comics, Neil was a comic book nerd. That guy was a nerd, but he was also a theater queen, a Fire Island queen, Jewish from Long Island. There was all this stuff and fucking amazing designer. And he was a really important part of the sort of kind of DC editorial group. And when he left, his queer influence left, and the vacuum was filled by 3 straight guys. And it really changed the creative direction of the company, who was hired, the sorts of stories that were told. And I should say again, it was still a very friendly company, but without Neil's queer presence, you could feel the tonal shift in the content itself. And so I think so much about, again, we're spinning, but mostly about the importance of point of view as much as simple representation, right? Like, a gay character interests me far less if they don't have an interesting or queering point of view that might spin a story in a way that's unexpected.
The beauty and the joy of it, the celebration of all these identities, because it's in these sort of flower forms and they're bold and they're colorful, but they're all overlaid in a way that they fit and they're connected, but they also have their separate distinction, so beautifully illustrates the intersection of identity. And that's what I love about how they did it. There's a way you could have done this with, sharp edges, or without complexity, or without different ridges, right? And the way they did it is, yes, these things can fit together, and sometimes they overlap, and sometimes they connect in this way, and sometimes they flow. And so you see that, and it brings a feeling that and that you understand. And so I love that. But when I gave them the list, I said, oh, these are the categories, but they really deepened it with their expertise to bring forth this art. And that made me think, yes, that is exactly it.
And so I love that there are open spaces. There's a couple of empty flowers, and there's, this emptiness that allows the reader to say, oh, that's my identity. Or in the future, this is what we've uncovered now, because we are, identity is so fluid right now, and we're wonderfully discovering how we can express ourselves in so many different ways. So this allows for that potential future as well.
Oh, I love that. And I love what you said about the open flowers. It's so true. I mean, even I think about just new identities that I'm starting to take on at this stage in my life. And that, or my relationship to other identities I've had, how those change with age. So I'm just rethinking now from what you're saying, you're teaching me, I'm rethinking how some of those identities fit together, even from when I started the book. And that's really cool.
Looking back, it's extraordinary to me that I wasn't out to myself as a teenager. I had crushes on guys. I fantasized about guys. I was, since we're uncensored, I masturbated about guys. you hear that in my voice because I'm used to the middle grade stage where we have to be very careful. But at the same time, when I lived in Los Angeles, I wasn't like unsophisticated about the world, given the time. Nonetheless, as a young person, I just shut it all down in my head. I just was like, it means nothing. I don't really feel that. It's just over there. It's not me. That's how I was about my sexuality. it's just fantasies. It's just this. It's just that. It was never me. And I was never, and I would never say the words, I'm gay. The closest I would get would be like, oh, everybody's a little bit gay or everybody's a little bit bisexual. And I would sort of toss things off like that. And it took falling in love with somebody, which I did freshman year of college, to make me deal with myself and to actually come out. I was at Yale in the 80s, and it was a very safe place to be for gay people. I mean, certainly it was actually, I was a few years younger than Judge Kavanaugh, and he was obviously in a different Yale than I was in, but he was there, but in my little bubble of sort of like arty bohemian, intellectual bookish, types, it was very okay to be queer in college for me at that time, in a way that in a larger culture, it really wouldn't be for another, say, 20 years or so. So I was very, very lucky in that sense. And the guy I fell for when I was a freshman, he was involved in gay politics at the time. I don't remember what it was precisely, but the college was, they were writing the first sort of gay rights into the bylaws of the school, and that was sort of big deal in the college at the time. Anyway, he was involved with that and very out, and I thought to be with him that I had to come out too. So in the space of a week, I went from literally less than a week, actually, in the space of like 4 days, I'm going to say, I went from not acknowledging to myself that I was gay to telling the entire school that I was gay. It was like I just shot out of the closet like a cannon. It turned out to be dumb in certain ways. Like my boyfriend at the time, actually, I wasn't shrewd enough to pick up on it, but he actually had a thing for closeted guys. So once I was out, I was no longer as interesting to him. But anyway, I was suddenly, literally marching in gay pride parades after having not even whispered to myself that that's who I was. I mean, it was initially it was a huge relief. I mean, I remember the first night after making out with him for the first time. It was the middle of the night. I left his apartment. It was snowing in New Haven, and I remember laughing. It was one of my best memories of my life. Walking out of his apartment, the snow starts to fall, and I'm just giddy because I'm in love, and I just kissed a guy for the first time, and I said to myself, I'm gay, and I just thought it was so. I laughed at myself for like, how could I have not known this? Because then I just sort of told myself what I've just been talking about, that, wasn't that you masturbating about guys for 10 years? Like, how did you not know you were gay? It was like this huge weight was off my shoulders, and it was an ecstatic moment for me.
Gun violence affects us all. We know that there are 100 Americans that are shot and killed every single day, with many more wounded. And you bring a good point. This intersectionality between, being a woman of color, a member of the LGBTQ community, a mother, things like that, it crosses my mind every single day. I'm not a survivor of gun violence. I don't know anybody in my family who has been personally affected by it, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen. And so I feel like it's important to me to constantly raise my voice, and not only for raising awareness, but also for our survivors. We're a nation of survivors in this country, and we don't have to live and die like this, experiencing the threat of gun violence every single day. And I feel like I've heard so many stories from survivors that say, I can't get out of bed certain days, or I can't even speak through my tears on certain days because it's just too much. And so I feel like for me, it's important to continue that work for them on the days that they can't. I can't imagine speaking about my own two daughters in the past tense. When I hear stories of mothers talking about their children as they were something, it's just heartbreaking to me. And so I feel like it's just so important to carry on those stories and to say the names of these family members that people have lost to gun violence. And so I personally feel like bias motivated crimes are rising, and LGBTQ people continue to be targeted for who they are and who we love. From the Pulse shootings in Orlando to youth suicides and anti-trans violence across the country, the LGBTQ community is suffering as a result of our lax gun laws. So it's important for us to do the work and to continue to raise this awareness as well, because it's everybody that's affected.
And speaking to that directly, and I know that you're an author first and foremost and a journalist, but there's also a nice bit of activism involved in what this is. I was hoping that you might be able to, as a last bit of kindness, impart to our viewers some direct actions that we can take as individuals to help in this journey to make menstrual justice more of a factor in our local communities, nationally and internationally, for those that are watching abroad.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a very simple thing everybody can do, and I know this may sound like not activism, but it is. It's about representation. So in your bathroom, in your home, in the bathroom that guests use, put a jar with some pads and some tampons, whether or not you think anybody's ever going to need them, so that they're there along with the soap and the water and the toilet paper, so that it has to become everywhere. We have to normalize menstruation that way. So that's one thing you can do. If you have kids in school, or you work in a school, to find out how sex education is being taught, biology is being taught. There's a great line in there about a kid coming out of school saying, I know more about the biology of frogs than I do about my own uterus. So those are things you can do. And there are efforts in your city about taxes, in your state about taxes. And again, it's pretty easy to find it if you go to menstrual justice and put in your state on Google, you're going to find what's going on around you. And my hunch is that as people become more and more aware of this subject, you're going to see it in the world around you. It's like, if you buy a certain car, all of a sudden everybody seems to have the same car. If you have a particular kind of dog, all of a sudden you see French bulldogs everywhere. It is in the conversation. It's around you. And if you can talk, if you can, you should. To talk to people around you about what you've learned, and isn't this interesting, and isn't this wrong, and there's so many things that we could do to ameliorate it. A lot of it is just language, and not joking and not shying away from it, and reading the article. You're going to see more and more news about this as well. So becoming more and more informed about it is something else you can do. And of course, you can donate to the really wonderful organizations that are doing great work, including PAD Project, which produced the film Period End of Sentence. And they do a lot of support of programs in the United States and overseas, helping communities create products, create jobs for women, create and create self-esteem and respect and support education as well. So there's lots of things that we can do, but start by putting stuff in the bathroom, and hopefully someone will come out and say, why is that in there? And then you'll say why.
Over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a growing awareness that the criminal justice system as a whole has lots of problems, that far too many people are in prison, and that the system is incredibly ruinous in terms of spending tons of taxpayer money for very little progress, for very that we're not meeting the goals, right? If the point of the prison system was to correct something, and they still are called departments of corrections in many states, that it wasn't actually correcting anything, right? That people were coming out of prison sort of worse psychologically than they went in, that they were actually more likely to commit more crimes, and to have more trauma that would spark addiction and impulsive actions, that were illegal, and all manner of just human tragedy, right? And the criminal justice system as a whole is massive. I mean, there's more than 2 million people in prison, and the death penalty is a tiny part of it. There were fewer than 20 executions last year, and even at its height, the death penalty only affected a few hundred cases out of many, many thousands around the country. But I came to see that the death penalty was the sort of pinnacle of the system, that it was the most punitive, harshest thing that we as a society were doing to people. It was the ultimate expression of the idea that this system, the criminal justice system, is most oriented towards punishment as opposed to rehabilitation, because ultimately executing someone is the least rehabilitative thing you can do, right? And when you have executions, when you have the death penalty, it makes life in prison without the possibility of parole seem a little less extreme as a punishment, because it's not the worst. And if you have life without parole, you then also have 40-year sentences and 30-year sentences, and all of them seem like the lenient choice because you have the death penalty. Whereas in European countries, there isn't the death penalty, and a 20-year sentence is considered extreme and intense, as might strike some viewers as a reasonable way of thinking about things. But in America, the death penalty just felt like it contorted the whole system towards punitiveness, towards punishment. And I felt that there was a lot of kind of intellectual value in focusing on it to understand how it plays that role, and how we as a society had made this big turn towards punishment, towards letting go of rehabilitation, towards viewing people who commit very serious, very tragic crimes, not just as, someone who is at the end stage of a lifelong tragedy in which they were traumatized, and they themselves underwent abuse and were the victim of all sorts of horrors. But we sort of turned away from that and said, no, this person is evil. This person is irredeemable. This person has to die. And so I think, just to tie this all up, I came to I think I found a lot of value in situating the death penalty in the wider criminal justice system and understanding how it affects that system.
So where was the moment when you had requested these letters and you had thought, oh, I'll get a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen, then they started pouring in? What was the breaking point between you being very excited about having so many and then saying, oh, I have so many?
It was when they kept, it was before book time. It was, I asked for 12, and all of a sudden I saw that my post on Facebook had gone viral and had been posted on this other huge site. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had to brace myself. And then I kept long after the workshop was done, weeks later, people are like, is there an address we can send them to? I kept getting emails. I'm like, maybe I should keep going with this. So, and I, as the more I thought about it, I was like, this could be amazing. Get all this love into one book. And so, my process was I started going through the letters that I had received. Most of them, I did not get one bad letter, but there are a few that, one of the things I ask women to do is not make assumptions about class, not make assumptions about religion, not, make assumptions about sexuality, because people tend to do that when talking to girls. You know, it's, oh, are you, you don't have a boyfriend? Are you depressed? Or, just give it to Jesus, not making those kind of assumptions that might actually turn off a girl instead of making her feel loved. So there were some letters that didn't quite get that right. And so they didn't make it into the book. But like I said, I had some general letters about that were uplifting and were like advice and, general inspiration. And I kind of bracketed the book there. I wanted girls to come in and feel light and loved, which is why the identity chapter is at the beginning and in the preface, all that stuff. And then ending in advice, and then kind of worked into some of the more difficult issues. Like you'll find the chapter that is, I didn't ask for this, which has a lot of difficult issues in there in the middle, because I wanted girls to feel enveloped in warmth, but I didn't want to not talk about things that I like mental health that were very important and girls, needed to hear about.
It's as though there's been this Pandora's box that's been sitting there this whole time, and we've opened it to the fullest. Is there opportunity?
I think that's a really interesting way to put it, to Pandora's box, because I think you asked why was Trump so effective? I think one reason why he was so effective is that he showed Republicans what they could get away with. He showed, for a while after 2012, Republicans were thinking, well, maybe we should tone it down a little bit. And then the people who ended up running Donald Trump's campaign, they said, no, what we need to do is really ramp up the white identity politics. And they did. And even though Donald Trump didn't win a majority of the votes, and I think that's very important, he did, his coalition was so geographically optimized that he did win the Electoral College in 2016 and succeeded in being president. And I think, going back to the Bertha thing, what is so effective about Donald Trump is that people who watch Fox News are being told every day who to be scared of, who to hate, and why they should be scared of and hate these people. And Donald Trump spends all day marinating in that Fox News universe, and then he reflects those concerns back to his audience. And in doing so, in a way that, Republican politicians don't do it quite to the level that he does it. And in doing so, he is validating those concerns. He's telling them your fears and your hatreds are real and worthy, and I respect them, and you are not alone. And that, creates a kind of intimacy between Donald Trump and his audience that other Republican politicians have a tremendously difficult time replicating. At the same time, they are continuing to try to replicate it because they understand it as a viable strategy, in part because the 2020 election, Joe Biden got millions more votes, but in the Electoral College, it was a squeaker. And so to them, that showed them that Trump politics were more viable than they thought or might have assumed. And as a result of that, they're going to continue down that path. They're going to continue down that path until they pay a price for it, a substantial political price, that is. And that's, unfortunately, that's simply the way it's going to be. I mean, hopefully they will pay that price sooner rather than later, and we won't have to live in this state of concern about the fate of American democracy. But at the moment, the issues that Donald Trump raised are going to be with us for some time.
It is funny the way you can watch on CNN and Fox as people fight for the soul of Captain America or Superman, right? Like these icons, it's very easy to dismiss these things, right? Like I come out of academia where it's like, I just watched as the humanities collapsed, right? Like funding just disappeared. Because the arts don't matter, right? Like the arts are not something worth funding. We need to fund the geology department because this whole university is owned by a mining corporation, right? Like that's how it works. But we're increasingly, I think, seeing that if you want to control the soul of a nation, the soul of a people, you have to control its art, which is why they keep wheeling out Dean Cain to complain about Captain America, because it's like Superman says Captain America is right wing and conservatism is important, right? Like, as much as it's easy to be like, these are 4-color fantasies for children, we're very aware these things signify, and we speak in metaphors, right? And we use these things to think about our culture, which is why they become so high stakes, which is why every time a Marvel movie comes out, it's like the culture just explodes as it processes it, I think. Because every little scene, every little line of dialogue can have strange repercussions in the way we think as people and as we understand each other. They become a kind of lingua franca. A lot of my dissertation actually was about the way that once we no longer share a common religion, culture becomes the space where we negotiate what our common values are. So you and I might not be, I might be Catholic, you might be Protestant or Jewish or whatever 16th century London was made up of. Maybe we don't worship the same, even if we pretend to, but we can all go see Shakespeare's play and can then the new play and then negotiate from that what we believe is valuable as a culture.
Okay, so let me tell you some of the takeaways, strategic and tactical takeaways from ACT UP that I think are helpful today. So the first thing is that it was not a consensus-based movement. So you did not have to agree. There was a lot of disagreement. ACT UP was very New York, and this is pre-gentrification New York. So with a lot of arguing and, you know, that type of thing, very confrontational. But it had a one-line principle of unity: direct action to end the AIDS crisis. And that was as opposed to social service provision. It was not a social service agency. It was a direct action political movement. If you wanted to do direct action to end the AIDS crisis, basically you could do it. So if, let's say, so for example, the campaign to make needle exchange legal in New York. Needle exchange, where you give addicts, they can exchange dirty needles for clean needles so that they don't have to share needles, which was a mode of AIDS transmission. This was very controversial. David Dinkins at this point was the mayor. We had a black mayor. The black community was not in favor necessarily of needle exchange. People felt that they were enabling addiction, and they wanted an abstinence model. And instead, ACT UP embraced harm reduction, to try to make people's lives better without, having to force a complete turnaround in behavior that wasn't really possible. And we already knew that. So because needle exchange was controversial, not everyone in ACT UP was in favor of the project. So if you didn't want to do needle exchange, you could argue with them, but you wouldn't stop them from doing it. Ultimately, you just wouldn't do it. If something was going, so many things were going on in ACT UP that if you didn't like a certain project or you didn't agree with it, you wouldn't try to stop it from happening. You just wouldn't do it. You would find the people that you had shared values with, and you would organize something with them. And other people who didn't like what you were doing, they just wouldn't do that. And so this type of radical democracy allowed everyone to respond effectively from where they were at, instead of trying to force everyone to be in the same place. And this is really why ACT UP had so many different kinds of actions, so many different kinds of campaigns. We're in so many communities and so many milieu all at the same time, because people felt free to do something that they felt was meaningful. And I want to say that if you look back historically at movements that try to force people into one common analysis or one strategy, they all fail, because people can only be where they're at. And if you can't recognize that, then you're not going to succeed. So that's, like, in a sense, the biggest takeaway.
You mentioned earlier, and this is something that we find to be really heartbreaking here at the center, because we do advocate for a lot of youth, queer youth in our works, our day work, as it were, as opposed to what we do here at the Power Hour. And we find that a lot of kids are outed before they're even aware of their own identity. And you mentioned it earlier, and I think it's a really interesting thing that a lot of people don't understand. And I think if you don't go through it or don't witness it, it's really something that needs to be explored, and I think needs to be discussed. I think that teachers, and I find administrators administrators more than teachers, but will casually say, oh, if you weren't so gay, or, if you didn't, identify in this way, or swish around the hallway, or whatever it may be, right? All these things we've heard. it's heartbreaking, and it's we don't explore enough, that we need to really let folks know how dangerous it is, above and beyond the emotional difficulty, that it's life-threatening for some of these kids.
It is life-threatening, and it's so essential. And perhaps educators or people in positions of power are sensing that if you are swishing around the hallways, as you're saying, that there's a performative aspect to that, and yes, maybe there is for some young kids, but through performance, through these sort of performative acts, it's like having a piece of marble, and you're a sculptor and you're chiseling away bits at it, and sometimes you play different roles. I mean, this is so true to sort of discovering your queer authentic self. We try on different hats. We try sometimes literally, but different costumes, different clothes. As you said earlier, I've sort of known as wearing caftans, and that's become part of my identity out here in the desert. I should have one on today, but all of that. Sometimes it doesn't stick. Sometimes it's not part of ultimately who we are. But if we don't get to try it on, if we don't get to behave in ways, as long as it's not harming anyone else, it is part of chipping away and ultimately sort of chiseling our identities. And so there's two sides to that. Either it's truly authentic, in which case someone should not be judged for that. And if it is performative, it's part of discovering who we are, and it's part of as I said, the human experience. So that should not be discouraged either. And I think it's better that nowadays the kids have a safer space, but it's not truly safe, and it's not safe for everyone. I say that. I'm very aware that I'm a white gay man, and so and the culture has changed now, so that my whiteness and my maleness give me more protection, and sometimes even override my queerness, in culturally today. So I try to listen as much as I can and advocate for others who I know really deserve the safe space that I largely have today.
And did that allow you another avenue in your other relationships after you had been able to let go of some of this, or make it a more positive, empowering experience? Did it change you as a friend, as a partner, as a spouse, as a mother?
It's a great question. I can say, the thing I think of first is are the casualties with white friends. That was inevitable. That there were some friends from college who I kind of held on to for reasons I couldn't quite identify, and I understood in the process of writing this book was about the white gaze, right? Was about that kind of sense of wanting approval, of adjacency, the power of white adjacency, the ways in which I had sort of quieted myself and not been true to myself, and not known how to do that without the risk of, sort of disturbing or disorienting or conflicting with this whiteness that I still held high, right? I mean, that's the thing about whiteness and white supremacy and systemic racism, is that, it's all of a piece, and it's all very, very good at what it does. And, I didn't realize how much I internalized it. And this is, really something to say. I'm not sure I've ever said this. I didn't realize how much I'd internalized it until I married a white man who was culturally conversant about Black history, right? A lot of my girlfriends said about him, you married the white family you should have had, that you deserved, right? Who could talk to you about these things and help you feel not less Black, but more Black, more who you are.
your arms get stronger when you lift other people up. And if you can get out of that scarcity mindset, whatever people want to call it, crabs in the barrel, X, Y, Z, if you can get beyond that and know that you will be stronger through community, even if you are self-interested, right? Even if you're a self-interested person, investing in other people will come back to you tenfold. It doesn't always work like that, but if you're doing it for the right reasons, it will. So I'm just so happy that you brought that up and that we could kick it off this way, because as you could tell, I got real animated, real excited, because when I came into this world of books, what's up, Cynthia? Thank you for the comment. When I came into this world of writing, I felt like an outcast in some ways, and in some ways I still do. I don't have my MFA, my master's in fine arts of writing, which is something that folks who are studying writing get. I came from the world of startups. I was in sales. And I'm sure that many people, when they first heard about me, or I reached out to folks years ago before I'd ever really written anything and asked for help, I'm sure some of them questioned my sincerity, or they were saying, this guy seems a little bit too sincere, and oh, he worked at a startup, he worked in sales, maybe he's trying to sell me. But fortunately, over time, real recognize real, right? And people see what I'm here for, and that I am someone who champions my authenticity and looking to be as authentic as often as possible. There are definitely times that I fail, to keep it honest, right? To be honest, I fail to keep it authentic. I try to be honest, like, as much as possible. But to be embraced by people like Robert, like Deesha, who you're speaking with, Maurice, right? Maurice is, I got a lot to say about Maurice. Of course, Robert, all the bookstagrammers out there, Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenia, another writer, Nafisa Thompson Spires. These are people who embraced me and did not make me feel unwelcomed. And I'm just grateful for it. And what that does with me, Robert, is it makes me want to double down and doing the same for others, right? And not just even leaving the door open with my foot holding it, but with my arm outstretched saying, come through. That's what I'm trying to do, man.
Tonight is such a beautiful experience. We're going to tell you that Emilio Delgado is going to join our board of directors here at the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice. And we couldn't be more honored by you believing in what we're doing in our mission in the center, in our community. And I want to thank you so much, my new friend. And
oh, yeah. Well, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I mean, I'm really honored in order to be part of that, your organization, because you people at the Center for Social Justice are carrying on what we tried to do for 50 years on Sesame Street, is bring the people together, get that love out there, between people and just, just make it good, make it happy for everyone, not only the kids, but the grown-ups as well. No matter where you come from, no matter what your language, no matter where, whatever you eat, it doesn't make any difference, but it is an honor to be a part of the organization, and I'm happy to be here.
You have touched us and you have honored us, and folks, look out. There'll be an official announcement. We'll have a big party, whether it's virtual or in reality. If we know
party, yeah.
You'll come out, and but we're going to do such wonderful things together, my friend, and thank you.
Yes.
In the meanwhile, I do want to, if you don't mind hanging out for a minute, I'd love to say goodnight to our community together, but let me tell everybody that we are here on the Power Hour. In the meanwhile, before we find a new home, we are here 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific every single weeknight. We're always making magic. We're always building community. And these are the kind of connections that mean the world to us. And thank you, my friend. And if you would do me the honor, can we say goodnight to our community together?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay.
So here we go. Until soon, my friends, much love and respect. Be good.
Be good to each other. Be good to your family. Your real family or chosen one, right?
And most especially.
And what?
And most especially.
And most especially, here it is. Be good to yourselves. You need it, and we need you here with us.
We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers.
Hey, Robert Martin, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So can I tell you, we're close enough now, and I'll share this with the audience too. When you call me Robert Martin, it's literally one of my new favorite thing in the world. I love that. For those of you who don't know, I shared with Peniel that my name, Robert, is in honor of Robert Kennedy, and my middle name is Martin Luther King, because my parents were very, very wonderful people. And I carry that honor every day in the work I do. And Peniel, you're the only one that has come to call me Robert Martin, and I truly dig it the most. So thank you, my friend.
Oh, no problem. It's an extraordinary name, man. It's a great name.